Hey guys, it's Nicole Eaton with the Rock Your Soul book and podcast, where we talk about how to hack your mindset, grow your intuition, and live your best life. I've been dealing with a lot of clients lately who are feeling stuck, and obviously we're in a time period where things are not moving forward, but even if they were, it's not uncommon that I encounter clients who are in a position where they're just feeling like, man, this has not been working and I can't seem to do anything about it. Or, I'm really unhappy, but I'm also really scared that nothing will positively change for my benefit. So we get into these positions where we kind of lock ourselves in. So today I want to talk about why we feel stuck and what you can do to get unstuck in your life. So the first big thing that I think keeps us stuck is the idea of scarcity. And if we think about the world and if we really believe in the universe, and I don't know what you believe in, but I know that I truly, personally, really believe in the universe, is that there's an abundance of just about everything. There is an abundance of money and love and careers and options. And if we begin to say, if I don't have this, I have nothing. If I leave this job, I'll be jobless forever, or I'll have to get a job that's less than. Part of what scarcity does is it takes your problem and makes it worse because it takes your problem and then it says, oh, okay, well, you have this problem, but your only other option is to also be miserable, but making less money somewhere else. Or your only other option other than this, person that you're dating or seeing is to be alone forever. And I can't tell you how common this is that this comes up as this idea that there's nothing else out there for you. And so I think the first thing you have to be aware of like, what am I limiting? What is my mindset limiting in my brain? How am I making my options scarce and small and worse? Because if you really think about it, anything can happen at any given moment. I was reading an article about a model who she was like discovered in a shopping mall, and that is now she's like a supermodel, but she was just at the mall with her family. And so sometimes there's things you can control and things you can plan for, and there's things that you can't control and things that you can't plan for. So we get into this space where we start to tell ourselves stories about the alternative being worse. And it's a very good tactic for our fear to keep us in the same spot, because even if we're miserable, maybe we're comfortable. We know we can handle the miserable. We know that we can deal with it because we've been dealing with it for years. And often what happens is our baseline begins to reset to allowing crappy to be normal. And I was watching my other podcast, Just Buzzed, which is kind of just a silly after dark kind of podcast. But we were talking about the docuseries, The Tiger King, and how there's this kind of cultish, polygamist, interesting culture going on. And I'm not, judging anything or anyone, but I will say, when we create a normal, it may not be a normal that other people are normaling with. It may be something so out there far-fetched that other people can look into your life and be like, why are you doing that? What's that about? Is that really serving you? Is that really helping you? And I think that's kind of the funny thing is like, I was just writing a little bit in my book and I was talking about how when I was in high school, there was this kid next to me and he smelled really bad. He was like at the locker right next to me. And this poor kid he smelled really bad. And I just kept thinking like, how does he not know? Like, how does he not know? But the thing is like when you've been living in a condition so long, it becomes your normal. You can't always tell that it stinks. You can't always tell that something is wrong with it when you've been living in it. But what you can tell is how you feel about it. So even if you're not really sure if this is a situation you need to move from, you can tell if you're feeling dread or misery or irritable constantly or just feeling off all the time. If your feelings are a direct message to you about what you need to do differently in your life. So if you're in a low space more often than you're not, I do wholeheartedly believe in chemical depression and chemical anxiety, but I also believe that half the time anxiety and depression come from us staying in conditions that are not in alignment with who we are, us staying in jobs that we absolutely hate, us staying in, degree programs that are just not the right fit. And a lot of times we stick around for somebody else. And so part of, the idea is scarcity of deciding there's nothing else out there for you, deciding there's not ever going to be love again or not ever going to be a high paying job and that things can't be better. So part of getting unstuck is saying, okay, so I don't know what that looks like. And I think it's okay to say, I don't know sometimes, but I'm hopeful that there's something better. Couldn't tell you what it looks like right now, but I'm hopeful that it's better. And even just changing your perception around it instead of deciding that it has to be this or that. That's called all or nothing thinking. We discuss it a lot in cognitive behavioral therapy, but it is basically it's this or that. There are no other options. There's no exclusions. There's no exceptions to the rule. The other thing that keeps us stuck is sometimes our fear gets so big that it starts wrapping around other emotions, right? So sometimes the question is, if I make a change in my life, what will I have to admit, either to myself or to other people? What is that truth that I'm not telling somebody? What is that piece that either if I say it out loud, it's going to feel really shameful? If I admit who I am, if I admit how I feel, if I admit that I'm not overly thrilled. And what are the perceptions of other people that are going to come, at me? What are, my family members and people I really, really care about going to think or say or feel about this? Because a lot of times we stay stuck for other people's perceptions, which is pretty jacked up, right? We stay stuck because we're worried about the repercussions of other people who are not living our lives, who are not dealing with the day-to-day misery, who are not stuck, who are not feeling this deep aching when your soul wants you to move. It hurts. It hurts. It is uncomfortable. It is daily uncomfortable. It is nightly uncomfortable. It doesn't feel good at all. So when your soul is asking you to move, you can't brush it off for too long because it's going to start manifesting not only emotionally, but a lot of times physically, like that tension in your shoulders and your back and that pit in your stomach or the stomach issues you've been having. Like your body does not skip a beat in telling you something's really wrong here. You need to do something different because we're shutting down and your soul shuts down and your emotional sense shuts down and then your body starts shutting down. So I always say half the time I really, really believe that physical ailments are energetically or associated with energy and stuck and trapped energy. I think a lot of things can really be resolved by resolving the energy. So what do you have to admit? Do you have to admit like a shameful thing? Do you have to admit that maybe you went to be a doctor, but you absolutely hate it and now you feel ashamed that you don't want what your parents wanted for you? Or do you have to deal with the fact that maybe you're not perfect and maybe you are needing to leave this relationship and maybe it is your second or the third failed relationship or failed marriage? Is that something that you have to admit to yourself, even though you're feeling like a perfectionist? Like, how could you possibly admit that? Or, is it compliance? Are you complying with what other people want for you rather than what you want for you? Has that become more important, or is it just fear? Sometimes we have to deal with portions of our personality just to get into a space where we can make better choices for ourselves. Sometimes we have to say, okay, I was feeling like a failure because I didn't want to do this anymore, or I wanted to drop off out of school and start my career as a musician, or whatever the case might be. Sometimes those feelings of just shame come up, and shame is a beast. Shame is something that just lingers in you and kind of creates this feeling of unworthiness. And so when we house shame in us, and one of my favorite authors and speakers, Brene Brown, is a absolute master on vulnerability and shame. But once we start to collect shame in our body, it's almost like this piece that hangs over us, deeming us unworthy of better things. So when we house shame of feeling like, man, I'm just not doing good enough at life. I'm not where I wanted to be. I'm not, I'm failing at this or that, or my career or my finances, or I'm going to have to sell my house, or I'm going to whatever, that we start to collect this feeling that we're not good enough. And that's a bigger problem than actually making the decision itself, is this inherent feeling that we're no longer worthy. And I think that it's really, really important to understand that worthiness has no requirements. There is nothing you need to do, be, or say. It doesn't matter how many times you fuck it up. You're still worthy of love. You're still worthy of belonging. You're still worthy of good things. I don't care how bad down the rabbit hole of addiction you've got. I don't care if you did some things that you're not really proud of. I don't care if you've, done whatever. You're still worthy of love and belonging, and every damn second is a moment to choose that for yourself. It's choosing abundance, it's choosing you, it's choosing your future, it's choosing your happiness. Every single moment you get a chance to start over and decide that you're worthy. You're worthy of better, you're worthy of more. You're worthy of love. You're worthy of belonging. You're worthy of people who treat you right. You're worthy of happiness and joy. You're worthy of all the abundance the universe has to offer you. And there is nothing in your blueprint document of your soul that says any differently. I wrote in Rock Your Soul that you wouldn't go to the hospital and the maternity ward and decide which one was the crappy baby, because we can kind of recognize equality when we're first born, when we're first here, but somehow we get these stories in our head that disappears when we get older. It doesn't. We're all born with the same stuff. We're all in the same energy, and we all have the same inherent worth, value, and rights. It's just claiming it. It's just coming back and saying, no, I know this is my worthiness. I know this is something that I have and that I deserve and that I'm going to allow to show up and manifest in my life. So reclaiming your worthiness and deciding that, and shame, quick note on shame. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on it because, like I said, it's a beast. It's its own unit, but shame loses its power when it's spoken. So finding a good friend, finding a therapist, finding me, NicoleEaton.com, and booking a session, whatever you need to do to make sure that you are outing it. Because the longer it stays hidden, the more power it really collects and grows. So when we get into a space where we're acknowledging shame, even to just a really good friend, just somebody who's not going to judge you and not going to think you're crazy and not going to roll their eyes at you and not going to half listen to you, finding someone who will sit with you while you say some just heavy stuff, finding somebody who loves you, releasing shame's power comes by outing it. So even if that's just writing it down, sometimes when we tell the truth to ourselves, that is the biggest release, the biggest freedom that we could possibly give ourselves. Let's hear a quick word from our sponsor. If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain. It's free. There's creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcast, and many more. You can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. But the good news is you don't have to feel stuck forever. And if you're not sure where to start, I have some thoughts for you. So I want to give you some ways that I've worked through my own personal stuckness in some ways, and in ways that I work with my clients to help them kind of move out of stuckness. So I think the biggest thing is recognizing that feeling stuck is basically a sign from your soul that something needs to change. So that uncomfortableness is what we call contrast. So when something is not what aligns with your soul, you'll start to feel uncomfortable. So feeling stuck is basically like something needs to change here. You need to get on it. And then I think a lot of times we feel like well, I need to figure it all out. And, if I'm going to leave the job, how am I going to pay for my bills? And how am I going to do this and that? And what's going to happen with my kids? And what's going to happen with my house? And what's going to happen with my dog? And, whatever else. We feel the need to see the end product before we make any steps towards it at all, which is daunting. That isn't how life works. I was talking to somebody the other day, and I was talking about how far I've come mentally, emotionally, financially, physically, whatever in the last, 5 years. And I was like, if I look back, I can't even decide any significant, crazy moments that led to that, but I'm a whole different person in a lot of ways. And it's crazy how slowly change actually occurs. But the one thing that we can do, even if we don't have it all figured out, is make one tiny, tiny, tiny step. Small things stack and become bigger things. And if you can kind of just focus on the tiny ways to make your goal possible, maybe you feel stuck because you really want something to change in your career and you feel like you want to write a book. And maybe you just write a couple paragraphs or a couple pages a day. Maybe you don't commit to a 400-page book right off the bat. Maybe that feels overwhelming. Maybe you, don't tell your boss you're quitting, but you start just kind of putting together your resume, making small steps. Maybe you don't do any of that. And maybe you just admit to yourself, I think this is a huge step. This no longer works for me. Because when we stop denying our truth, the universe can step in and open up more doors. But when we're rejecting our truth, that keeps us stuck even longer because that rejects the energy of newness. But when we can say, man, this situation no longer serves me, it's no longer, I'm worthy of more than this situation has to offer me. That is one of my favorite affirmations. I'm worthy of more than this situation has to offer me. Whatever that looks like for you, whatever your situation is, make the tiny step to acknowledge that is a step. That is an action step. Because when we start to decide, our brain opens up. So we've got this magic of the universe coming in that can provide us with opportunities, but also it helps our brain see possibility because our brain is filtering through the beliefs we give it. So if we believe nothing can change and we believe it's going to be this big daunting task and we're so overwhelmed by trying to figure out the end result, our brain is going to shut down and block out any options that could present themselves. But when you just make that mental decision, that changes everything. I also like to pose the question of, what are you cool with this situation 10 years from now? Can you see yourself still in this uncomfortable, stuck situation 10 years from now? Because the reality is that nothing changes if nothing changes. And if you're cool with that, if you feel like that's the life I want to live, then go for it. But most people cringe when I say 10 years from now because they can't fathom being this uncomfortable for that long. Because the thing with contrast, that uncomfortable thing when your soul's like, no thanks, is it will just get worse. And this was, true for me when I was switching from working as a not-for-profit mental health worker to opening up my business. And I remember I loved my job working at that not-for-profit office for so long. I loved it. And then suddenly when I started to think about opening my own space, everything started kind of changing at my office. We got a new boss who was pretty challenging in a lot of the policies she put in place. And there were a lot of board changes and policy changes that were just like, are you kidding me? This is what we're doing. I even had some conflicts with some of fellow employees that I had never experienced in my life, let alone that time. So a lot of times what happens is when we don't change something, the universe will gather around you to make it so uncomfortable that you don't have a choice. I remember one of the last days that I pulled up before putting in my notice that I was going to leave was I was sitting in the parking lot and I was just crying because I did not want to go inside that building. So giving yourself permission to acknowledge that things may get worse if you don't make a change because the universe is trying to help you. The universe is for you, not against you. If you are making choices in your alignment, I promise you some things just work out. If you're really making decisions not from your head, necessarily or from your logic, this is the right thing for everybody else, or this is the right thing for what I'm supposed to do, but just from your freaking heart, I swear to you, something is different about those decisions. Doors just open. I had a friend who really, really wanted to move and really just in her heart felt like she needed to be somewhere else in the world. And she was applying for jobs and nothing was working out. And she's like, you know what? I just feel like I got to go and figure it out when I get there. And she put in her notice at her job. She still didn't have a job where she was planning on moving. And the day she walked out of her job, she got a call about a position that hired her right away. It was $20,000 more than what she was making, and it was the absolute perfect fit for her. So sometimes doors just open where we didn't see them because we're making decisions that are in our best and highest good. Another thing that you have to consider about feeling stuck is it breeds negativity in your life. A lot of times that filters over into your relationships with your family and friends, that filters over into your irritability with your children. And a lot of times it kind of creates this culture of negativity in your life. And I think that might be harder than the change itself, right? Is this feeling that everything is falling apart because this one piece is just radiating over into your other areas of your life. And so when we really clear out negativity, whether if that's a situation or a person or a place or whatever that is, when we begin to clear out negativity, we open up not only our energy and frequency to better things, but just the feeling of better things coming in. It feels so much lighter when people around you are positive, when you can share a positive relationship with your children because you're not on edge and irritable, when you have a positive relationship with your partner because you're not on edge and irritable. So when you clear the negativity out of your life that's radiating in your space, it kind of puts you into a whole different energy, a whole different mindset that puts you also in a better position to manifest the things that you want. The other thing that I would say is giving yourself time to think about it and obsess about it, because I think sometimes overthinking makes us feel more stuck because we come up with more and more scenarios that are not in our favor. We come up with more and more possibilities that are also not in our favor. There is a very big difference between problem solving and overthinking. If you're problem solving, you're finding solutions, you're creating an action plan. If you're just sitting, mulling over how miserable you are, it is not getting you anywhere. It is not driving action. It is not putting you in a place where you're going to excel. So, you might be in your own head worrying and obsessing, but it's not moving you forward. So sometimes I did a Tough Mudder, which is a 11-mile obstacle course designed by the military or something a couple of years ago. And I remember there was some really challenging obstacles that I was dreading. One specifically, it was called Walk the Plank, and you had to get up on this platform and jump off of it. And most people, they were like worried about being electrocuted. I was worried about jumping off this damn plank because I hate heights and I was just terrified. And I've found this system with the whole thing of if I just said, okay, I'm going to go. I'm just going to go. That it made it so much easier if I just stopped letting my head get in the way and create possibilities and scenarios and add to my fear. That if I just said, okay, what action am I going to take today? What action am I going to do right now? What action? Okay, right now I can't do anything about the job. Maybe I worked on my resume and I'm really tired and there's just nothing else for me to do today. I'm going to go work out. I'm going to go for a walk with my kids. I'm going to go take my dog to the dog park, whatever. I also believe that to get unstuck, you have to understand that great things can happen twice. Your best can be yet to come. There are things that are possible for you that you can't even fathom. And I really, really believe in the right place and right time. And I really, really believe that if we're starting to admit our truths to ourselves, that the universe really opens up possibility for us to get into a better spot, to find better people, to connect with better connections, whatever that is that we're really needing. I feel like that opens up a gateway for opportunities. So your job today is really to get unstuck, to admit your truths to yourself, whether your action is simply just admitting your truth, whether your action is finding whatever faith you can muster to know that the universe has something better in store, whether it's mindset work around understanding that the world doesn't have to be scarce, that what you're seeing is part of your belief filter. So I've noticed this a lot with career. With people, they're like, "Oh, there's no jobs in my area. There's no jobs in my area." I hear that constantly. And I think that there's this time period where what happens if we just flip it? Every day, more and more jobs are opening up in my area. I can't wait to see what's there for me. And you kind of just reset what your brain is looking for, because remember, there's this really important thing that what we tell ourselves and what we believe about the world to be true, we have to see, because that is how our brain is kind of filtering through all of the information in our world, is to make sure it matches what we believe. So if we begin to shift our belief by saying more and more options are opening up every day, and I can't wait to see what opens tomorrow. I can't wait to see what potential is there. I can't wait to, more and more people are, getting single every day. More and more opportunities for musicians are popping up every day because of the World Wide Web. Like, all of this potential is there, but you have to begin to train your brain to start seeing it. Love is everywhere. Job opportunities are everywhere. I can have, be, and do because I'm worthy of it. So your job is to tell yourself the truth. Your job is to understand what you may have to admit to yourself to get there. Your job is to eliminate that scarcity, all or nothing thinking that you may have going on if you're feeling a little stuck. And to give yourself a chance to take some tiny, tiny, tiny steps. Give yourself a chance to know that you don't have to have it all figured out right now. You probably won't. You probably won't even figure it out once you're there. There still might be steps that you didn't think about, or maybe it'll go quicker and better. A lot of times we build things up in our head that they're going to be this awful, terrible event that we're going to not be able to get through. And the reality is, if we can take it one day at a time, one moment at a time, one small action step at a time, that changes everything. Thanks for listening to the Rock Your Soul podcast. Make sure to subscribe, rate, share, and tag me in it at NicoleEaton.xo on Instagram. You can set up an appointment with me for a soul therapy appointment or a soul reading at NicoleEaton.com, NiCholeEaton. And make sure to leave me a review. I love you guys. Thank you.